Namaste. Another way of greeting in Sanskrit is Harihi Om. Welcome once again to this course on Introduction to Basic Spoken Sanskrit. In our previous lesson, we looked at how to count in Sanskrit. Today, we are going to apply those numbers in our different nouns and pronouns. So today, the lesson that we are going to cover is lecture number 8, and the subject is the plural of pronouns and nouns. The objectives of the course are the following: to learn the plural of certain nouns and pronouns for the three genders in the subject form, technically known as the nominative case or the prathama vibhakti. The second part would be to learn the plural of the verb to be in the present tense for those pronouns. And finally, to learn how to ask the question as well as answer it. The question is how many? So first, let's start with the plural of nouns and pronouns in the masculine. So we have chashakaha, chashakaha. Now we have many glasses here. Ekam, dve, trini, chatvari, pancha. Okay. So we have chashakaha, chashakaha, chashakaha. Similarly, chamasaha becomes chamasaha. Great. Now let's look at some words and see how they are written. So we have chashakaha, chashakaha. Now will you try? Chamasaha, chamasaha. Very good. Purushaha, purushaha. Very good. Shikshakaha, shikshakaha. Vrikshaha, tree, vrikshaha. Margaha, margaha. Naraha, naraha. Balakaha, balakaha. Janaha, janaha. Chhatraha, chhatraha. It's a nice open mouth with an aspirated sound at the end. Chhatraha. Apanaha, meaning shop, will be apanaha. Deshaha, country, deshaha. Lovely. So for this particular lesson, I have gone through all the words that we have on the table here. But what I will do for the next ones is I will just leave them for you to find out for yourself, because you will have a sample. And the best part of Sanskrit is that it really is like formulas. So if you know the formula for one thing, no matter what the numbers that would follow or how you replace the different letters A, B in that formula, they'll all behave in the same way. So once you learn the plural of the masculine words ending with a in the subject case, you will learn it for all times. And the beauty is, the reassurance that we have is that you can know for sure that if there is a word that comes up with an a masculine in 1,000 years to come, it will still be it will still take the same plural forms as we have today. So if chashakaha is chashakaha, 100 years down the line, whichever word. So we have a modern gadget today which is sanganakaha, or the computer. So sanganakaha will become sanganakaha. Very good. So moving on. Just let's look at that. Purushaha, purushaha. Naraha, naraha. I'd really like you to open your jaws wide and exaggerate and also use the aspirated sound. So naraha, right? Now let's move on. Let's look at some pronouns that we've already visited earlier. So we look at the pronouns for the first and the second person, formal and informal, and see how they behave. So we have aham purushaha. Now for aham purushaha, for aham, the plural is vayam. Aham, 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 aham. I. Many becomes we, and that is vayam or vayam. So aham becomes vayam. So now let's combine it with the noun. It becomes aham purushaha will become aham purushaha, aham purushaha, aham purushaha becomes vayam purushaha, vayam purushaha. Once more, vayam purushaha. Similarly, aham Bharatiyah, as you can see the second word on the screen, will become Vayam Bharatiyaha. Vayam Bharatiyaha. Aham Sanskrita Priyaha. Very good. Now let's look at the you formal. So we had the word for masculine, which is Bhavan. So if you had many yous formal, it would be Bhavan, 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 Bhavantaha, Bhavantaha. Say that, Bhavantaha. So Bhavan Gayakaha, Bhavantaha Gayakaha, Bhavantaha Gayakaha. Now what you would notice is that as you are trying to put these words together, your mind has to do a lot of computing, and that is the aspect of Sanskrit that really makes the mind into a very sharp tool to be able to analyze the world and categorize it. So we have Bhavan Gayakaha, Bhavantaha Gayakaha. Because the word is Bhavan, it's not an a ending pronoun, it's a n halant, so it's Bhavan, and therefore it will become Bhavantaha. Alright, so that's something that we will not look at in depth in this particular series of lectures, because that's a little more advanced level. But what I will give you is at least the basic ones with the masculine words ending with a, and we focus on the second part. So Bhavantaha Gayakaha. Excellent. So do it with Bhavan Sajjanaha, meaning a good person, will become Bhavantaha Sajjanaha. Excellent. Now let's look at the next word, which is the informal you. The second person is Tvam. So Tvam, 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 Tvam becomes Yum. Yum. Say that. Yum. You see, there are certain similarities with the English also. We had with Vayam, or the English has the we, and in Sanskrit it is Vayam. Now we have the word Yum to indicate plural second person, and we have the Sanskrit word which is Yum, and the English is the you. Alright, so we have Tvam Krida Priyaha, Yum Krida Priyaha. Now let's look at the words by themselves. So Aham becomes Vayam. Bhavan in the masculine respect form for the second person will be Bhavantaha in the plural. Tvam, you, informal second person, becomes Yum. Moving on, let's look at the third persons now. So we've looked at the third persons in our previous sessions. Can you try and recollect what they were? If a man is standing far, it will be Saha. If he's near, Eshaha. And the question is Kaha. So let's see what happens to that now. So Saha, 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 Saha. You have it there on the screen. It is Te. What's the English? They. So that's an easy way to remember that the plural for third person in the masculine is they, or te. It's not the sound but the th. Okay, so te. So we have Saha Purushaha, Saha Purushaha, Saha Purushaha, Saha Purushaha will become Te Purushaha. Will you try the next one? Saha Bharatiyaha. Excellent. Te Bharatiyaha. Saha Nataka Priyaha, one who loves drama. Te. Did you get it? Te Nataka Priyaha. Excellent. The next one, Eshaha Nayakaha, meaning actor. Eshaha Nayakaha. Eshaha, Eshaha, Esha, Esha becomes Ete. And we know the plural for Nayakaha, it is Nayakaha. So, Eshaha Nayakaha, Ete Nayakaha. And then the question, Kaha Lekhakaha, Kaha Lekhakaha, or the writer. So, Kaha, 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 Kaha becomes Ke. if you look at the words that we've already looked at, we see that there is some kind of a pattern. So saha becomes te, eshaha becomes ete, kaha becomes ke. So we have ke lekhakaha. Which writers or who other writers? Ke lekhakaha, etc. So putting it together now for you, saha te, eshaha ete, kaha ke. Now let's look at some nouns in the feminine. So we have, you remember, sthalika, meaning dish. So let's get a few dishes together. Sthalika becomes sthalikaha. Sthalika, sthalikaha. Very good. Similarly, kunchika, kunchikaha. Bunch of keys. Kunchika, kunchikaha. Now let's look at some words there. So, sthalika, sthalikaha. I would also recommend that you close your eyes and as I tell you the word, see if you can just repeat it in your mind, okay? Mala, very good, malaha. Mahila, kshikshika, petika, petikaha. Very good. Churika, churikaha. Balika, balikaha. Vatika meaning garden, vatikaha. Pathashala, pathashalaha. You're really getting a hang of it, I'm sure by now. So a student, female student is chhatra, chhatraha. Kunchika, kunchikaha. Lata, lataha. Excellent, uttamam. Now moving on, we've got this word with the ending with the e. So we have words ending with the e in the feminine. So we have, for example, lekhani, which means a pen, and then you have a few more will be lekha, not lekhanyaha, because that means something else that we saw in our previous session of the genitive case. So lekhani, 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 lekhanyaha. I normally tend to do this with the fingers in order to just indicate to the body that it's a short vowel. It's not a aha. So it's lekhanyaha. Lekhani, 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 lekhanyaha. Kupi. Very good. Kupyaha. Varna lekhani. Lovely. Ankani. Ankanyaha. The phone. Duravani. Excellent. Duravanyaha. Now let's look at some words quickly. Kupi. Duravani. So close your eyes and just see if you can go through the words. I will not give you the answers because you can figure that out for yourself. So just close your eyes and see if you can just listen to the logic and reproduce the word. Alright. So nari, naryaha to start with. Lekhani, ankani, marjani, which is an eraser. Nartaki, a dancer. Putri, daughter. Patni, wife. Sahodari, sister. Droni, which means a bucket. Nadi, the river. Very good. So, what I wanted to also indicate to you is the difference between the short sound and the long sound. So, here we have a pen. So, lekhani, 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 lekhanyaha. I'll just show them to you. So, lekhani, 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 lekhanyaha. Now, if you have the long vowel, it will be, you remember the genitive, it would be lekhanyaha namaling. Lekhanyaha namaling. So, link, 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 lekhani, 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 lekhanyaha. Got it? Great. Uttamam. So, now let's move on. We'll just look at the words as we've seen them now. So, the feminine word ending with a, like mahila, becomes mahilaha. The feminine word ending with e, the long e, like nari, becomes naryah. Uttamam. So we move on to, here we have the plural of certain pronouns like we saw in the case of the masculine. Let's look at the cases in the feminine. So first we look at the first and second formal and informal persons and see what happens. So aham, 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 aham. Aham doesn't change irrespective of the, it is irrespective of the gender. So the plural of aham or I's, the plural is we, will remain vayam. But the word that it is associated with, that would change. So for example, you have aham mahila and the plural would be vayam mahilaha. I've next taken a word ending with a long E. So if you have aham buddhimati, the plural will be vayam buddhimatyaha. Uttamam. Moving on, bhavati is a word ending with a long E. So bhavati, 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 bhavati would be bhavatyaha. So now that's an easy one when it comes to combining with the long E. So let's take the second case. So we have bhavati nartaki, the second word, and that's easy because both end with a long E. So it's bhavatyaha nartakyaha. Now what happens when you have a long sound? So bhavati gayika. Now the mind has to be very alert because you have to remember that the words ending with a get a different plural ending for the feminine case. So we have bhavatyaha gayikaha. So although it is a feminine word, because of the ending, the way it is declined with the plural is different. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then we have twam. So again, twam doesn't vary with the gender. So twam, 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 female will still remain you, yum. But the word it is associated with will indicate to you whether it is a female word or feminine word or not. So we have twam krida priya, a lady who loves sports. The plural will be you, yum, krida priyaha. And I also have put in you, yum, devyaha. So what would be the singular of that? Twam devi. So that was a special exercise to see if you can remember what the singular is of that. Okay, Uttamam, let's move on. Let's look at the whole form. So aham vayam remains the same for masculine or for the feminine. Bhavan becomes the bhavati and bhavantaha becomes bhavatyaha for the female. And twam remains the same irrespective of the gender, which is you, yum. Now let's look at the plural of some pronouns. So again, do you remember what the pronouns were for she who is far away? Yeah? So sa, nearby, esha, and the question is ka. There is a rhyme about it. Sa, esha, ka. Now just based on what you have done, the pattern that you have looked at earlier, do you have any guesses what sa would become? Yeah? Okay, so like we had seen, the saha became te. Here the sa will become taha, taha. Similarly, the esha will become etaha, and the ka, guess, kaha. Very good. Let's look at them. So we have sa mahila, taha mahilaha, sa mala. Do it. Very good. Sa nari, taha naryaha. You remember what I mentioned, that you have to pay attention to the ending of the words because that will indicate to you how it will be transformed. The next one we have is esha naika, which will become etaha naikaha. Esha duravani, etaha duravanyaha. Ka lekhika, lady writer, kaha lekhikaha. Great. And then kaha nadyaha. Which rivers are there in India? Kaha nadyaha. or ka nadi, which river in the singular, in the plural becomes kaha nadyah. Uttamam. Let's look at that now as we have it here. So, sa becomes taha, esha, etaha, ka, kaha. Very good. Moving on. So, we have the neuter forms here. Now, what do you think that would become? So, we have pushpam. Now, if you have many flowers, pushpam, 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 pushpani. Pushpam, 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 pushpani. Similarly, we have patram and we have a lot of papers. So, patrani, patram, patrani, karavyajanam, karavyajanani. Great. Let's look at some words here. Phalam, 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 phalani. Pushpam. Exactly. Pushpani. Mitram. Mitrani. Very good. Chitram, chitram, chitram. Chitrani. Chalana chitram. Chalana chitrani. Patram, patram, patram. Patrani. Vastram. Vastrani. Remember, when there is a r kind of sound that comes at the end, it will get a n sound. Okay. So, griham, griham, griham. Uttamam. Grihani. Nagaram. Nagarani. Phenakam. So, did you say phenakani or phenakani? Okay. So, the answer is phenakani. It's a dental, not the cerebral sound. Vyajanam. Uttamam. Vyajanani. Dwaram, the door. Dwarani. Uttamam. Now, combining that with the pronouns again. So, in this case, there is no first and second person, because you can't have a pronoun for that in the neuter gender. So, we have here the third person pronouns. So, we have tat, 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 if you remember. Tat, 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 tat will become tani. Etat, etani. And kim, 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 kim will be kani. Got that? So, let us look at it. Tat mitram, tat mitram, tat mitram becomes tani mitrani. So, I just want to draw your attention again to the fact that we have a mitrani, the n which is there. Now, that transformation of the simple dental n happens because the previous sound is a r, it is a murdhanya sound. So, in the presence of a murdhanya sound preceding the n sound, the n sound undergoes a transformation and becomes a murdhanya n. So, we have tani mitrani. So, pushpam also has the presence of a murdhanya sh. So, it will become pushpani. Great. Nagaram, nagarani. Go back. Nagaram, nagarani. Lovely. Moving on. Etat, yanam. Yanam is a car. Will become etani, yanani. Etani, yanani. Uttamam. The next one, question, kim griham, which house? Kim griham? Kani grihani. Again, because of the r that is there, grihani. So, you would have noticed that in the yanani, there is no murdha n. The nasal is not a murdha one, because it is the regular form is the dental n. So, just bear that in mind when you notice differences in the plural of the neuter gender sometimes. So, putting it together here for you, tat, tani, etat, etani, kim, kani. Now, we have looked at the nouns that are in the masculine, feminine and the neuter. and we looked at the nouns in the masculine and the neuter ending with an a, and in the feminine that ended with the a and the e, and we saw the transformations that the word undergo in the plural form. Now let's see what happens to the verb. So to start with, I'll just look at, in this session we'll just look at the verb to be. Okay, so we had asti, so chashakaha asti, and then we have chashakaha santi. Did you get that? Asti santi. Sthalika asti, sthalikaha santi. Uttamam. Lekhani asti, lekhanyah santi. Uttamam. Patram, paper. Patram asti, patrani santi. Very good. So let's look at that. Purushaha asti, purushaha santi. Mahila asti, mahilaha santi. Kupi asti, kupyaha santi. Phalam asti, phalani santi. You would have noticed that irrespective of the gender of the word, the verb asti remains, becomes santi alone and nothing else. Now what happens in the negative case? If you say is not there, so karyam or work, nasti, no work. Karyam nasti, there is not a lot of work, so karyani na santi. So the word na is added to indicate the negative. We have looked at the third person in the plural for the verb asti, which became santi. Now let's look at the first person, the second, formal and informal, and see what happens to the verb asti when we are conjugating it with these different persons. So in the first one we have asmi, aham asmi, and we have the famous Upanishadic statement which says aham brahma asmi, aham brahmasmi. So that when it becomes plural becomes vayam smaha, vayam smaha. And then we have with the formal second person is bhavan, becomes asti. So again you must notice that the second person formal is really conjugated like the third person singular, or in the third person for singular or plural. So bhavan asti in the plural will become bhavantaha santi, and then the second person informal, which is tvam, will be tvam asi, and that in the plural is yuyam. So yuyam becomes stha, or yuyam takes the verb asti in the form of stha. So yuyam stha, tvam asi, yuyam stha. Now let's look at a few examples. Aham mahila asmi, vayam mahilaha smaha. Now if you wanted to say aham gaika asmi, it will become uttamam, vayam gaikaha smaha. Now let's do something masculine. So if you had to say aham kridakaha asmi, will become vayam kridakaha smaha, uttamam. Now let's look at the second person formal. So bhavan purushaha asti, bhavan 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 bhavan, bhavantaha purushaha santi, uttamam. Bhavan chhatraha asti will become bhavantaha chhatraha santi, uttamam. Now let's look at the feminine. So we have bhavati mahila asti. So bhavati 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 bhavati, bhavatyaha, bhavatyaha mahilaha santi, bhavatyaha bhavatyah mahilah santi. Bhavati chhatra asti. Bhavati, 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 bhavati. Bhavatyah chhatraah santi. It can be a little confusing to remember the E ending is different from the R ending of the feminine, but yet that's the very exercise for the mind, this alertness that one requires when one is engaging with Sanskrit grammar and Sanskrit as a spoken language. So, bhavati mahila asti will become bhavatyah mahilah santi. Uttamam. Next, tvam for the second person informal is tvam purushah asi will become tvam 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 yuyam purushah stha. Again, yuyam purushah stha. Let's do it with another masculine word. Tvam shikshakah, teacher. Tvam shikshakah asi. Yuyam shikshakah stha. Let's do it in the feminine with the word Sanskrita priya. Tvam Sanskrita priya asi. Yuyam Sanskrita priyaah stha. Uttamam. So now, moving on. We've learned how to count, we've learned the plural of things. A very important question that would follow is to ask how many of things are there. So, for example, you say chashakah asti. The question, interestingly, is always in the plural, like in English also. How many glasses are there? So, the entire question is formulated in the plural. So, kati chashakah santi? Ekah chashakah asti. Now, if you had many, so let's count them. Ekam, dve, trini, chatvari, pancha, shat. So, totally we have shat, including the steel one. So, kati chashakah santi? Shat chashakah santi. Again, shat chashakah santi. Similarly, kati chamasah santi? Ekam, dve, trini, chatvari, pancha. Kati chamasah santi? Pancha chamasah santi. Now, let's look at a few sentences. These are things from tradition or general questions, general knowledge questions that exist. So, we have kati swaraha means how many notes are there. Swara is the word for the notes when we are talking about music. Kati swaraha santi? Vadatu? Sapta swaraha santi. Sapta swaraha santi. Uttamam. Similarly, kati vedaha santi? Chatur vedaha santi. Chatur vedaha santi. Uttamam. So, I would just invite Piyush to come over and we'll just have a small chat about this question kati, just to get a feel of it. So, Namaste Piyush.
Namaste.
Sarvam kushalam kim?
Kusalam sarvam.
Uttamam. Tatra pashyatu. Now, kati grahaah santi?
Nava grahaah santi.
It says general knowledge exam today. So, kati grahaah santi?
Nava grahaah santi.
Uttamam. Kati pandavaah santi?
Pancha pandavaah santi.
Uttamam. Kati angulyah santi?
Dasa angulyah santi.
Uttamam. Astu. Bahu dhanyavadah.
Dhanyavadah.
I hope you have got a feel of how this can be applied in your daily context, and try and see if you can start using this more. I will also, in the course of the following sessions, start speaking to you a little more in Sanskrit even when I am explaining it, so that your ears get familiarized to listening to the sounds of the Sanskrit language. To close, like I always do, there's a beautiful quote that I found by Sri Satyaranjan Banerjee, and the quote is on the role of Sanskrit in modern India. It says, "Indeed, the role of Sanskrit in modern India is very great. In the words of Max Muller, a people that can feel no pride in the past in its history and literature loses the mainstay of its national character. When Germany was in the very depth of its political degradation, it turned to its ancient literature and drew hope for the future from the study of the past. So, if we have to look back very seriously at our past and at our heritage, Sanskrit would act as a very powerful master key to give us access to that vast treasure of knowledge that we have. So take the study seriously, practice as much as you can, invite your friends to join you, teach your neighbors, teach as many people as you can. The more, the merrier. And then we will all be able to maybe speak more Sanskrit in this country someday. Dhanyavadaha.